recording without a microphone. Now here we go. Today is the morning. Happy retrograde. Uh, it's been really retrograde out here, so just going to jump on into that, right? So today's show is going to be a mix of a few things. We're going to end off with some tarot card readings, and we're going to start off with some topics, and some common themes that have been coming up. So I asked on my story, and I have a link in my bio for people who want to ask questions or, talk about themes. So one of the questions I asked was what's a common theme that's coming up for you right now? And quite a few people answered. So I'm going to do my best to keep short answers and be able to answer everybody. And also, if you're tuned in and you have any questions or anything that you'd like to ask or, talk about in general, feel free to put that in the comment section. And yeah, good morning. I hope everybody woke up okay. I know I woke up okay. I had a little weird. It was just a little weird. Nothing too crazy though. But we're here and we still made it work, right? So starting off with the question, how do we navigate retrograde, right? So right now we're in a thing called retrograde. I'm not going to get into the specific details of everything that's happening astrologically. So I'm just going to keep it real simple. Retrograde is when Mercury retrograde specifically. And retrogrades are when planets appear like they're going backwards, but really they're just moving slower. And once we understand that, we can really just kind of understand that's exactly what the universe is asking us to do. Not go backwards, but maybe just move slower a little bit and kind of pay attention and ease into everything that's going on. So I didn't even have a moment to adjust myself, so I'm just going to go ahead and adjust myself on this show real quick. Starting over that microphone. But yeah, so Mercury retrograde is all about just slowing the pace down and, seeing what's going on around us. On a scientific note, Mercury retrograde affects, Mercury is the ruler of communications and things of that sort. So even airplane pilots and, a few other different major things, really actually consider retrograde. They won't take certain routes and do certain things. So it's affecting us on a cellular level, as well as an emotional, subconscious level and things of that sort. It's not just a theory of astrology, it's something that is definitely grounded in reality. And I feel the more people are becoming aware of it, the more they're realizing, and it could be kind of thought that, placebo, right? Oh, okay, I know Mercury retrograde messes with X, Y, and Z, so that's why I'm thinking or feeling this stuff. And that could be very real. I know for me personally, I didn't even realize that a retrograde was coming up so soon. And there was a few things going on, people, also it affects people on the road. This is definitely a time you don't want to take a risky run into the deli and not pay for the meter, because this is a time where a lot of people tend to get tickets. A lot of accidents happen, not necessarily just car, just accidents in general. That's why it's always asked to, just take a moment, go slower, either drive slower, or just do whatever you need to do to ground yourself, right? So I lost my train of thought. So I'm just going to take a moment and slow down myself and get grounded in this present moment. And, I wasn't intending on starting off the podcast with, doing the bowl. But I have a root chakra bowl with me. And I'm feeling if any of y'all are feeling like me this morning, maybe it's beneficial if we get into this first. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, if you want to just take a moment and ground down with me, I'm going to play the sound healing bowl that I have here that's attuned to a low frequency and a lower frequency to ground us into our bodies. And it's root chakra. It's all about survival, safety, and things of that sort. So if it feels good for you, just taking a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Closing your eyes and allowing yourself to receive the vibrations that help us to slow down, to feel safe in our body, and to feel nice and stable, sturdy, and ready for our day in a good way like that. That was nice. I don't know about you guys, but I needed that. That was a big, big, big mood. So shout out to the frequencies of this bowl, and to David, and to all the hands that it's touched, and to all the ears that it'll be heard from. So yeah. Thank you for taking that moment to slow down with me. You know, just like the bowl, when it's being played, it's like you started off and it's like kind of slowly picking up that vibration, and it's like getting bigger and bigger, but it's slowly doing that. And at first you hear the sound of the I forgot what it's called, but the thing that you hit it with, right? The mallet. And at first you hear that sound more. And sometimes that sound, like sometimes my ear likes it, and sometimes my ear doesn't like the sound so much, you know. But when I'm not but it's a tool, it's a means to bring up a frequency, right? So it's a vehicle for the design of this energetic bowl lifting up this frequency, and how it starts off slow, and then it gets higher, and it gets deeper. And, you know, I feel like that's something that Mercury retrograde in general just teaches us to do, is like, you know, I know a lot of people get nervous around this time, like, oh, you know, I don't want to sign no documents and do no things like that. It's like, I definitely don't recommend, you know, at this time, you know, if you're contemplating on like hitting up your ex, or like, you know, you're thinking a lot about past things, like I strongly recommend you don't do it, you know. Maybe sit with what medicine is coming up for you. Sometimes exes will come out of the woodwork at this time, you know, whether it's one, two, multiple, like whatever the case is, or you might be the ex that's coming out the woodwork. So it's important for us to check ourselves and remain grounded, not only for how we are in our own reality, but how we can affect others, you know, and rather than acting impulsively, just kind of sitting with the feelings, because the strongest feeling that we feel isn't always the one we should act on, right? We can be like big mad, like big mad, but like maybe if we sit with why we're like mad, we can kind of understand how it's coming from a space of being hurt, and have compassion and kind of nurture that part of ourselves that needs attention rather than deflecting it and projecting whatever anger or hurt is coming out of us onto others. So it's just doing our best to do our best. And that's really all I want to say about Mercury retrograde. There's a lot of material, a lot of different sources. I could plug that into the comments. I think it's important to not get so wrapped up in all of the details. Like, if you like details, I love details. Don't get me wrong. Like, I will go online and I'll research all of the things. But more recently, I've just been like asking myself, like, what am I feeling right now at this time? Like, what is it that is coming up for me, and how can I navigate this? Because, just like, even if you've ever like had a dream and you're looking up dream symbolism, it's like, it's cool, that it's available, and maybe we can find some kind of like grounding in finding what something means out, right? But it's so generalized. We couldn't possibly, sometimes it's more confusing, right? To find out more information about something that's generalized, rather than looking at it like, well, why is my either conscious, subconscious, spirit, whatever it is that you believe happens when you go to dream, into the dream world, like asking yourself, well, I wonder how that's coming up, or why that's coming up in that way. And then kind of removing yourself from the dream and looking at it like as if somebody told it to you, and knowing that person, maybe putting it together in that way, being curious, take everything with a grain of salt, even when it's coming from my mouth, take everything with a grain of salt, take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And yeah, so Mercury retrograde, nothing to be super afraid of. It is kind of weird time. Just slow down and take your time. That's my advice. Just listen to what your body's asking of you. And when you feel those really intense emotions, do your best to sit with yourself and ask yourself what it is that you need in those moments, so that you're not, leaving yourself. Because it's like when we are like, oh, okay, I'm feeling this uncomfortable feeling. Let me pick up and scroll. Let me do this, and let me go out and let me do that. It's like, if that's the best you can do at the moment, like, definitely don't feel guilt or shame around that. Just accept that that's how you're coping with it at that time, and then move forward. And then maybe the next time you're feeling that feeling, you can kind of be like, oh, okay, I want to stick with this. Because it's like, when we run away from that feeling, it's almost like we're giving that self-abandonment a little bit. So I strongly encourage you to stay with yourself through thick and thin, like you would, with a partner, because you are your partner. Our body is our partner. It's our vehicle in this lifetime, that our soul kind of glues into. So yeah. So that's all I got to say about that. So I'm going to move on to the next topic, theme, question, whatever the case is. So we got navigate in retrograde. How to be less apologetic about being yourself. I think the more we can be, the less apologetic and the more we can feel comfortable in being ourselves is when we're just learning to accept ourselves in different ways. I think that just takes time and effort. You know what I mean? Like, that just takes like consistency, like just sitting with ourselves, like even when we're like, oh, that's cringe, or oh, I wish I didn't do it, but it's like, oh, it's okay because I did it because that's what I wanted to do in the moment, or that's how I navigated, or that's how I reacted, but that's okay. It's like, of course we can see ourselves for these incredible beings that we are, looking at our strengths and being like, yo, like, I love that I consider people, and I love that I, do 5 jumping jacks when I wake up instead of, laying in bed for 5 minutes. Whatever it is that you like and or love about yourself, it's important to center, as well as, especially when we're like doing the self-reflection work, when we're in that process of like, okay, this is what I need to work on, this is what I need to work on, especially when you're in that space, like making that time and putting in that effort to be like, okay, what do I have space to work on? Like, what am I ready to let go of to then add something into my regimen? Because if we don't consider that, then we're like overwhelming ourselves. We're trying to, load up more a download when we have no space on our, computer or on our being, right? So we got to like clean up and defrag and make the space for the new downloads and the new installs. Like it's the same thing. It applies with our bodies, with our minds. You know, it's just about accepting ourselves in totality. And it's a lot easier said than done, but it's a beautiful, beautiful journey. And I strongly encourage, you know, and want to remind everyone, like I feel like a lot of these questions kind of coincide with each other. And that being like, you know, there's another one that's accountability versus compassion, right? And, you know, in that one, finding that balance, like those can both coexist. It's about just being honest with ourselves. And I think that's also how we can be unapologetically ourselves, is just being honest with ourselves. Like, I want to do, say you have a goal, right? You want to be consistent with waking up and meditating every day. So say one day you go to sleep at like 7 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and you can't wake up at 8 o'clock, you know, to meditate, and you have the ability to have a little bit of space to sleep. Maybe having compassion for yourself in that day, you know, like, okay, I won't be able to meditate at the same time at 8 o'clock, like I said I would all week, but I'll meditate once I wake up. And I'll make the space and I'll create that space. But not having that compassion, right, is like, then we create like guilt and shame and hatred towards ourselves, because we're like, if we do it, then we're not honoring the fact that our body legitimately needs sleep, and we know we have accessibility to the sleep. And then if we continuously run a cycle or run a habit of sleeping in late and not doing it, that's where the accountability comes in. Like, check in with yourself and be like, all right, well, is this something I'm doing all the time, or is this something that I'm doing, you know, every once in a while? And even if it is something that you're doing all the time, still finding compassion. Because it's like, in order to have accountability, you kind of need to have compassion in a big way. Like, because you can have, if you want, in my opinion, if you are going to have it long lasting, like longevity in it, we can have discipline, but if we don't know why we have discipline in certain things, if we're not looking at it and viewing it as something that we're doing for self rather than for someone else, then it's going to be fleeting, because eventually when we're not getting the validation that we want from whoever or whatever, we're not going to be disciplined all of a sudden. You know what I mean? If you're going to the gym every day because you're trying to, you know, impress a person at the gym, you know, or something, like when you stop getting your fix, when you stop getting your different chemical reactions in your brain and endorphins, and when that stops pumping, your brain's going to look for something else to feed it. So with that knowing, I think it's really important for us to plant seeds for ourselves, to validate ourselves, to hold ourselves accountable for the goals that we want to achieve, and then have compassion when we don't achieve them. Maybe we have an unrealistic timing. You know, maybe we're supposed to move slower with something. It's okay to move slow. It's like, you know, it's one of those things that we're told our whole life, you know, from people older than us usually, you know, like parents, friends, like tias, uncles, aunties, like whatever the case is. It's like, you know, slow down. There's no rush, right? But like, it feels like there is, right? It's like the world is crashing down. This is happening. These people are moving. It feels like a rush. I got my bills to pay. I got rent owed on the 1st. I got, you know, bills owed on the 22nd, the 24th, and 28th. Like, of course it feels like a rush, you know, but I mean, I was going to say name one time that rushing helped, but I have ADHD, so it does help sometimes for me personally. So I can't stand on that statement. Like the pressure itself, you know, the procrastination leading to the end, the executive dysfunction until the very close to the deadline, presenting my project in school the next day after finishing the night before, you know, things of that sort. Is it the most ideal thing? No, but doesn't get done? Yes. So I'm not going to say that, but maybe it's less stressful for our central nervous system and our body in general if we do take the time and go at something in a slower pace and kind of just give energy to it when we feel good to give energy to it. I went to an event last Saturday. Shout out to Steven and Charlie and everybody that was at that event. It was really dope over at Mother Pugs. And I was having a conversation outside with a few friends, and we were just talking about how, like, we wish that we could operate more so from a place of organic, like an organic reaction, right? Organic want to do something rather than like something forced. And there's things that are really important to note that, like, in a lot of our social interactions, we can actually navigate that way if we view it in that way, where we're not giving as much energy to certain things that we don't want to give energy to, and we are giving energy things that we do want to give energy to. Because at the end of the day, ultimately, any source of communication, energy, focus is feeding something or it's starving something. So it's really important to note, like, what are we choosing to feed and what are we choosing to starve, right? So if we're feeding an interaction that we constantly do not want to engage in, we're like giving it the okay for it to continue to exist in our life. If we're like, you know what, actually, I don't really want to talk to this person. I don't feel good when I'm having a conversation with this, and there's nothing that's requiring me to have this conversation, I'll respectfully not ghost. Personally, you do you. But, like, I personally will kind of just make a statement where, I don't have the space to have this conversation right now, and kind of leave it there like that. So it's just, and that can be applied to every other thing. Obviously there's certain things, like, we might not want to wake up to go to work, but, like, some of us do. And, but we know we have to do that because obviously we need money, we need to sustain life and things of that sort. So there's balance with accountability and compassion, and I think that everybody just has a different balance beam, and we all need to, like, kind of find out what that looks like and feels like in a good way. So I hope that kind of shine light on that topic. Another topic that was coming up and theme that was coming up for people is not people pleasing. Once again, all of these topics that are coming up are, like, really kind of in, like, a similar thread, and I feel like it's coming up with, like, self-respect and just, like, honoring ourselves and honoring what it is that we need and how we interact with other people. People pleasing comes from a lot of things, but one of the places that people pleasing tendencies come from is a neglect of some sort. Usually like some kind of emotional neglect as a child, right? Growing up, there might have been something that we wanted to, be kind of validated in our existence or navigating whatever it was as a child, and we didn't receive that, so we looked for it outside of our, like, family dynamic, or we weren't taught to give it to ourselves, right? So then we spend a lot of time in our life, sometimes our whole life, looking for someone or something to kind of fill that void, that emptiness feeling, that unworthiness feeling, that not enough feeling within ourselves. So we might do something for someone, and off the first thought, we're like, oh, I'm being so nice. I went to the store and I got this person this thing. But then you dig a little deeper and you're like, well, why did I get them this thing? Did I get them this thing because I genuinely wanted to? Or did I get them this item because I know that when I give it to them, that they're going to be happy and they're going to appreciate me and they're going to value me more. And then I'm going to get serotonin from that and feel worthy of existence. Regardless of what your answer is, it's nothing to feel ashamed of. At some point, this was a system that was put in place for survival because, you needed to validate your own existence as a little human being, and being like, hi, I exist. I want to feel good about it. It's kind of weird here, and just like finding different ways to validate yourself. I think it's important. I know for myself as a recovering people pleaser, it's like when I notice that I'm looking for validation outside of myself, rather than like cringe or feel shame, which innately do tend to be the very first emotions that flare up, I then have compassion for myself, and then I'll find a way to validate myself in like, oh, okay, like, yeah, like, no, you do look good in that. Yeah, you should do that. You know what? You're really great at that. Why are you looking for it outside? You know you're great at that. Don't doubt yourself. and just talk to yourself like you would to one of your best friends. Talk to yourself like you would to the person that you love, like whoever it is, like, or even if you're not one to communicate like that, like what you think in your head, like whoever you admire, like putting yourself in that lens to be like, yo, I really admire and appreciate me, and that's really where it's coming from. We're looking to be admired and validated from it. That's what people pleasing is, really, when you boil it down. It's like, that's what we're pulling from people. But the thing is, I think where it gets kind of like mixy and staticky is like when we're unconsciously pulling compliments and energy from people and we don't know it and they might know it or they may not know it. And then when you become aware of it, it's almost like jarring, it could be like embarrassing, like, oh my goodness, I really wore this outfit to do this. I took this picture to get these likes. I did this to do that. And it's like, yeah, you did it. So what? Like, you thought you needed that to survive in some like very primal view in your head. Like, now you realize you don't need it to survive. So put it down. Pick something else up, or just stay kind of empty-handed until you realize what it is that you're actually yearning for, and then give it to yourself. So yeah, that's how I feel about people pleasing today. Going into being vulnerable and putting yourself out there. Anxiety aside, and like the fear of the unknown, or it's like another thing too. It's like all common thread, right? Being vulnerable. Everybody wants to be courageous. Nobody wants to be vulnerable. When we are vulnerable, in order to, just like Brene Brown, she always mentions in her like TED Talks and podcasts and her books and all the things, is like, in order to be courageous, you need to be vulnerable. And she does a whole thing with like the definitions of everything. But essentially, just to kind of give a gist, because I'm not going to remember it word for word. Being vulnerable just means that you're like open, right? You're open. So like when you're vulnerable, you can have good things happen and you can have negative things happen. If you take your shield down and you're like, hi, I exist like this, you could be applauded, or you can have arrows shot at you. Like, it's a part of being courageous, right? Because now you're courageous for putting your shield down. You're courageous for showing yourself behind the mask. You're courageous for doing this thing that maybe so many other people were afraid to do. So like, let's use, for example, say you're an incredible musician and you are afraid to go in front of people and talk. The more open you are to getting, just like, you're going to get positive feedback, you're going to get negative feedback, whether that's verbally or body language wise, right? If you go up and you do it for yourself, you do it for the, whatever your reasoning is, whatever your why is, whether it's for yourself, your family, for all the people who couldn't, whatever it is, like, and your why and you kind of embody that and carry that with you, the better it feels, and then the more empowered you feel in doing that. But it's like, you're gonna feel uncomfortable. If anybody tells you different, like, I don't know, that's not my personal experience. I'm not gonna tell you they're wrong. I'm just gonna say, like, that's rare, like going and doing something. There's been so many different things that I've done. I didn't public speak. I didn't do podcasting or do moon ceremonies and stuff like that, just out the womb. You know what I mean? I had to like take my pride aside and my fears aside and be like, well, why do I want to do this? It's bigger than me. Usually that's what most people's why. It's like, it's bigger than me. And then sometimes it's like, yo, this is just for me. And that's okay too. Like, you shouldn't feel guilty if something is just for you as well, and you understand your why, you feel grounded in it, and then you walk forward. You might be shaking in your boots, but you still walk forward, and then you could look back and be proud of yourself. You can validate yourself, be proud of yourself in a really good way. So it's kind of beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to put yourself out there and to be vulnerable. And like, when you're putting yourself out there, you got to remember, like, nobody is you. Like, you might have things in common with people, but no one would be you. So no you is going to be out there already. So it's exciting. You get to share yourself with the world. And I think that's pretty special and pretty cool, So shout out to Mike for that. And shout out to Ashley and Lori for these questions that came up so far. You know, a few other folks had wrote on these questions as well, and shout out to everybody. You know, I don't know if anybody wants to have their name tied to the question, so I'm just going to kind of put it out there in that way where y'all are being acknowledged but not tied to any specific question. So yeah, you know, another thing that came up was rebirth and loss and new beginnings. So like those are two separate themes that were coming up for people that are kind of interchangeable, you know, in that way where we can't have rebirth without loss, right? We got to sacrifice something, and or, you know, something is sacrificed for us. Maybe we don't have even, you know, the ability to make the decision, and or, you know, we lose something. Loss isn't always death. Death isn't always physical. And it could look and feel very different for many different people, you know, like I experienced loss last week, and in a way that, like, you know, the dog that I had for like 14 years passed, and that was like really rough for me, you know, and I've been navigating that and like the grief that comes with that. And you know, it's so interesting because when we lose things, or like when we experience deaths, or death within ourselves, or death surrounding us in any way, shape, or form, it's like, you know, now we have to navigate grief. Even sometimes before the death actually occurs, we have to navigate grief because we know it's coming, whether that's in a relationship, whether that's in job, you know, whether that's in friendship, whether that's in physical reality, family member, whatever the case is. And you know, we kind of feel it coming sometimes. If we're really listening to our body, we'll feel it coming. We'll know something's changing. And in that moment, we either kind of grapple on and dig our nails in deep to whatever surface we can grab onto out of fear of change, you know, which is human nature, you know, nothing to feel bad about that. And or, you know, we move, we accept, and we kind of move with it. Not against it, right? And we're kind of accepting what's happening and looking at it in a different perspective. Like the whole Western concept of death is really selfish, in my opinion, and really, I feel like it's just not healthy for anyone, right? Because when even let's talk about like death, like dying death, like physical dying. When someone dies, it's like you have to be so sad, you have to cry, everyone wears black, it's all of these different things, right? There's an expectation to have it that way. Of course, we're all going to feel our emotions, we're going to feel loss, we're going to grieve the empty space in our own right. But then there's some cultures that celebrate, you know, because they know it's not the end. You know, energy never dies. Regardless of your belief system, you can be anything, really. Energy never dies. Like, that's a proven concept, right? It just changes. So regardless to where you think that they are or where they go, it's something. It's like, just like they die, they're reborn somewhere in some way, shape, or form, right, in their next lifetime, or whatever it is, like I said, that you believe in. And that could also be celebrated. You know, it doesn't have to be morbid. It doesn't have to be like, you know, super saturated and centered in sadness. Like, feel your grief, yes. Be sad, yes. Cry your fucking eyes out, dude. Like, do whatever you need to do. Scream on the top of your lungs. Punch something that, you know, maybe might bounce back in a soft way. Maybe a pillow, you know. Let's be healthy about it, right? You know, but do whatever it is that you need to do. And then whenever it is that you feel like you can, you know, you give yourself that space. Like the other day, for example, I gave myself that space. I tend to like to go into to get my car washed when I'm feeling like heavy emotions. Like, especially if I'm in the car, like I just want to go to a car wash, and then I'll go into the car wash, and then while I'm in the car wash, like I'll hysterically cry and I'll scream on the top of my lungs. And that's like my therapy. I give myself that like 5 minutes where I'm just in this other world of car wash. And like, as my vehicle is getting cleaned, you know, so that's something that I do. And I'll give myself, because in the past, like I've given myself too much space to wallow. And then this doesn't benefit me. It actually hinders me from living my life. So now I'm also dead with the person energetically because I can't manage to get myself out of that grief or sadness, right? You give yourself the space to feel it, but then you also got to give yourself the accountability, right? You have the compassion to feel it, but you give yourself the accountability to know, like, okay, well, I've been crying and I haven't showered in 2 days. Maybe I should get up and take a shower. Okay, I have to get up and take a shower. Okay, I have to get up and drink water, and it's like the accountability to your own existence and doing the things that you need to do for yourself, so navigating loss and rebirth is always going to look different. I mean, sometimes rebirth hurts too, right? Like sometimes like you come out like a new person. You're like, who is that? Like, I don't even know her. Like, do I like her? Do we are we okay with it? Like, because you're so used to yourself in a certain light and then you see yourself in a different light and you're like, oh, is this real? Is this authentic? But it's like, oh, no, you just peeled off a layer. Like, you shedded the snake skin. Like, you are just getting a new skin. Like, the old skin wasn't suiting you anymore. Maybe it had little holes in it, some cuts, some scrapes, some trauma pent up, And we're just kind of shedding it and getting deeper and deeper into the core of ourselves, right? And just learning as we go along. So, I guess, like, a lot of times any kind of birth or rebirth is going to hurt, right? Even the beautiful women who give birth and have great birth experiences, it still hurts to some spectrum, right? I would imagine so. So, yeah, rebirth hurts. Feels uncomfortable, but it's a beautiful thing, right? Because you're bringing new life, new light, new perspectives into a space that maybe didn't have it before. So, yeah, death and rebirth. That's a little bit on that. I love these themes that everybody's bringing up and the topics that everybody's talking about. I feel like they're really relatable. And, that's what Wednesday is all about, is kind of just seeing what's going on in the world and, like, just talking about it with you guys. And, like, whether you have questions or whether you just want to talk about themes or you want to hop on here and you want to go boop, 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 back and forth, we can do that. But Wednesdays are all about just tuning into ourselves and the balance of what's going on around us, kind of validating ourselves like, oh, wow, that's been coming up. Like, a lot of people said kind of the same thing in here. Maybe you were feeling alone. Now you get reminded that you're not. We're all kind of feeling that in one way, shape, or form. You're still your individual person experiencing your individual experience, having and processing whatever it is that's coming up for you. But it doesn't mean that you're alone, and you don't have to carry that burden of feeling or thinking that you're alone either. I feel like I'm missing one. Being less apologetic, navigating retrograde, not people-pleasing, accountability, being vulnerable, rebirth, lost and forgettings. Christine Pope wedding, and shout out to you and celebrations to you for that. And okay, here we go. Lori said, doing the fucking work regardless of how hard it is. So, that part right there, sis, is just, that's what it's all about. That's what all of this is all about. That's what coming together and talking about any of these self-reflective things are, It's like, feeling like you might be sore from a workout, but knowing that you still got one more in you, and like just doing it, feeling like you don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody that you love, but like being like, oh, I know this might be like, but let me just get myself in a grounded space and I can go about it in a better way. Because even if you anticipate something being like heavy or something, you can still like come get yourself into a grounded space and then change the energy about it. Because if you're going about something like, fuck, I don't want to do this, like, even whether it's a workout, whether it's a conversation, whatever it is, whatever it could be, if you're coming at it in that spectrum of like, fuck, I don't want to do this shit right now, like, yeah, there's space and potential that it could change while you're doing it. But something I found within myself and like what I've noticed in watching other people as well is like, when you change your mindset before actually going into something, you change the energy of what's going on around? Why are we waiting for other things to change our energy? We walk into a space, and why can't we change the energy into a better thing? Why can't we go into a room and simply because we're in a fucking good mood, everybody else is just feeling the ripples of that, rather than the opposite spectrum of like, you're in bad mood, you pass on that bad mood. You know, and I think that that's just something that we need reminded of, to know of like how powerful we actually are, and doing these different things, like in holding ourselves accountable for our own vibrations, for our own energy, for our own moods in a big way, we can do some dope shit. Like, it's like we're literally doing alchemy. We're walking into a space and we're like, actually, you know, this could use a little bit more pizzazz. Let me just fucking get myself in a little bit better of a mood. And then boom, you just watch it and you see it bounce off of people, you know? And I think that that's pretty cool. And it's like, just as, you know, negative or lower frequencies, lower vibrational energies are kind of easier to pass, right? Because it's like, I don't know exactly why. I guess it's because maybe if we're in a neutral space, it's closer, you know? Kind of thinking of like a radio, right? If you're trying to get to Hot 97 and you're like on 96.9, you know, and it's like close, you can drop down, you might be able to hear it a little bit, right? But if you're trying to go up, it's like, if you're trying to listen to like 105.1, like that's a far jump to get to. Like, you got to kind of like turn the little knob around a few times to get there. So it's like, it's just easier. It's easier to just look at things and be like, fuck, this sucks, right? Rather than being like, why is this happening? What is the reaction that's coming out of me? What is this experiencing warranting out of me? Rather than why me? Like, why not me? Why is this happening for me? Not to me, for me. You know, and just kind of like switching that around and just going from there, and just, alchemizing our lives like in a really real and grounded way. It doesn't have to be like super esoteric, and like, even though it is in a big way, it's just, it doesn't have to be worded like that. You know, just be responsible for your own vibration, be responsible for your own energy, and watch the way your life will turn. Like, I don't really got to say more than that. Like, you'll just see it. Like, I don't got to really talk about more than that. So I'll just leave off on that. Be responsible for your own energy. Just like, you know, even in the beginning of this podcast, I came in, I was a little bit kind of like, I don't know, I wouldn't say like antsy, maybe antsy, I don't know a good word for it, but I was not grounded, as grounded as I'd like to be. So I took responsibility for my energy. I was like, you know what? Actually, I'm going to pull out this root chakra bowl and I'm going to ground myself. If y'all feel like you want to do it, you can do it too. If you don't, then skip that part, you know? It's your world. You do what you want. So, yeah, thank you for everybody who shared their topics and their themes. And I'm happy that we got to kind of like talk about that. And we're going to get into the energy forecast of this week, and something that we should be focused on, what we should be stay away from, and things of that sort. So let me pull out these cards. I didn't even have one sip of my tea, y'all. I'm gonna have a sip. Are not the flowers the stars of earth? By Clara Lucas Balfour. Cute. I like it. Okay. So anybody who is open to receiving a reading at this time, whoever is tuned in now, who will tune in the future, may this message come to us in a good way. May we receive it full-heartedly. Take everything that resonates and leave anything that does not. So we're going to start off today with what is it that Kind of do. I'm gonna flip it. I'm gonna do it opposite. What is it that we should do to empower ourselves at this time? At this time that you're listening to it, because time is but an illusion. So whenever you hear this, I pray, Great Spirit, in a good way, please use me to be the conduit, send the message to whoever is listening at this time to receive the message in full that would benefit them, what can be empowered at this time. Practice self-soothing. You have the power to comfort yourself when you are upset. Place your hand gently over your heart and send unconditional love to ease tension and frustration. So, kind of what we were talking about before is like, when we're getting triggered or when we're feeling uncomfortable and when we're navigating these emotions, like that same place that the people-pleasing tendencies kind of live in that little nook, is the same place that we can kind of fill ourselves with self-soothing and finding these healthy coping mechanisms that we do, like putting your hand on your heart and just like feeling that pressure right there might feel good for you. Giving yourself a hug, like as corny as it might sound, like it might feel good for you. Like, pinching your hand or doing something, that gets you back into your body. I think that that's the most important thing, and the message that's here is like, we can empower ourselves by being in our body. A lot of times we want to leave our body because our mind kind of takes us places and we're not being grounded. So we'll kind of like doom scroll or think about 17 different scenarios or remember an embarrassing thought that we had, when we were in the 4th grade and we tripped in front of a group of people. And we're almost addicted to that. Like, we're addicted to this. We could be addicted to leaving ourselves and abandoning ourselves. Because maybe that's something we experience in our life and we're kind of following suit. So if any of that hits or resonates with you, I just want to encourage you to hold yourself and soothe yourself when you're feeling that discomfort. And you deserve it. You deserve to have the space held for you by yourself, as well as with other people. But there's a certain sovereignty that you'll find in that, especially if that's a common thread of like people pleasing and maybe some codependency tendencies. Nourish yourself and like come into that space where you can give yourself that as a gift. So yeah, what should we be focusing on at this time or centering? So I'm going to just look at these real quick because they did flop out. Okay. So they kind of, all right. Okay. So right now, sometimes when the cards flip out, like literally like flip out, I'm kind of like, no one asked you yet. I didn't pull you yet. Get back in there. You got to set your boundaries with your cards too, with everything. But these ones are pretty spot on. So what's coming up right now for us to focus on is we're in this place that a light is starting to glow. Like, we're focusing, whatever we are focusing on and we're feeding is blossoming, right? We're in spring. Things are starting to grow. They're popping out of the ground. Flowers are coming back. Trees are blooming. So we're blossoming. We want to make sure that we're giving that attention and focus on to the things that we actually want rather than what we're afraid of. Because if we're constantly centering and talking about the things that we are afraid of or our darkest fears and the things that we don't want to happen, we're actually feeding it. We're not starving it. We're feeding it. We're giving it energy and attention. And it's not to not acknowledge these things. It's just about putting boundaries and disciplining that. It's like, oh, okay, like, you might have to be late to something, right? Because maybe the alarm didn't go off and you're worried, like, oh, I'm going to be late. Oh, this is going to happen. We start thinking, boom, 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 boom. And we start creating all of these different scenarios of what can happen. I invite you in those moments, as hard as it might be while it's happening, is to go back into that self-soothing place and being like, I'll get there where I'm supposed to. Maybe that alarm went off and, you know, you didn't hear it or whatever happened, and maybe it was for a reason. Maybe, God forbid, if you woke up on time, you could have got into a car accident because somebody was driving crazy, you know, or maybe you missed a bus that some like fucked up shit was happening on, you know. Invite yourself to change the perspective when that fear space comes up, when that anxious space comes up. Another thing that's coming up right now is this is the time that because we're in the retrograde period, it's coming up in this reverse manner of, it says take the lead, right? So taking the lead in what? It's taking the lead in our passions, right? And what feeds our spirit. Specifically, it's a wand card, so it's a fire energy. And what is it that taking the lead to nourishing ourself and our spirituality and our passions, like not only our, like, you know, not only like building an altar and lighting a candle. Yes, that's important. If that ritual helps structure and remind you what you need to do for yourself and your reality, absolutely do that. But it's a for you situation. Like the energy that's coming up is like, you could take the lead within your own life energetically, take responsible for your vibration, right? Be responsible for your vibration. You don't even have to talk about it. You know, just it's for you. Like it's for you. It's inward, you know? Like even if you look at the card, it's a hand holding like the fire, right? And in the fire, the hand is facing towards me, like it's for me, and if it's for me, it's also for you, right? So it's for y'all, but just nurturing. So like paying attention to what we're feeding, it's just kind of reaffirming everything that we were talking about. And that's what I think that is so interesting about cards, is like this whole podcast in itself was kind of a reading for all of us, and then these cards were just affirming everything that we kind of did and scried within having conversations, sharing ideals. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So moving on. What is it that we should surrender to during this week? Surrender to your soul's path. Your life's journey has been perfectly designed for your soul's growth. Embrace every lesson in every moment. I know the impatient people are tired about this one, but it is what it is. You know, like some things are just not going to be very clear right now. You know, some people are kind of wondering, like, you know, what am I supposed to do with my life? Where am I supposed to go? Like, what's coming up? Like, and feeling that pressure. And, you know, of course, like, look at the reality around us. Like, of course we're feeling that pressure, you know. That's normal. And it's just another reminder to surrender to your soul's path. So how can we word that in another way where it's not like, surrender to my soul's path? How do I even do that? Well, surrender to what feels nourishing for your soul. Like, let's reword that. Like, if you are, you know, all of a sudden you're sitting in front of the TV and you decide that, like, you just start folding a piece of paper, and then you come to realize that you love origami, and origami completely nourishes your soul. Do some more of that. You know, if you realize that you go on a walk because your car got a flat tire, or you ran out of gas and you have to walk to the gas station, and you're like, I feel so good right now while I'm walking, pick up walking. It doesn't necessarily have to be career-based. It can also be career-based, and it can also apply to that. But how are you going to find your soul's path, your career, your life, you know, purpose in the moment, or whatever the case is? Like, how are you going to find it if you're not following the cues that are going to take you there? You know, it might look like something little, just like in the beginning of the bowl. Like, it's that little vibration that expands and gets bigger. You'll find something. It's like when you're playing Sonic the Hedgehog, and there's the little orb, and I feel like that's in mad video games too, right? Where there's that orb, and you have to click and you go, and then you follow it, right? It's like, oh, okay, follow me here, boom, and it takes you to the other part of the video game. That's what you're doing when you're following what excites you, what makes you feel super passionate, what fans your flames. Like, follow that spark. Nobody else can tell you what that spark is. Nobody can paint it out. You go to the best medium, best reader, you go whoever, and they might be able to give you the parameters that spirit allows them to, but you ultimately have to discern what it is that you're chasing, following, pursuing, walking towards, moving with, attracting, right? Yeah, and that's pretty much that. So I'm going to end off with the Peace of Mind book, the daily meditations for easing stress. And let's see what today's word is. And then I will see y'all next Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in with me. Okay. Today's 11th, right? Yeah? All right. Cool. Fear is the dark room where negatives are developed. By Anonymous. Fear is the dark room where negatives are developed. Anonymous. Remember some of your childhood fears, the ones that used to keep you up at night, reduce you to tears, or make you run to your parents. Many were probably natural childhood fears. An imagined monster under the bed, the first day of school, snakes, spiders, or even the dark. Now, when you think back on those fears, you can laugh. But what happens when you are confronted with today's fears? Meeting new people, paying your monthly expenses, speaking in front of others, spending time with your parents, giving up an obsession. Instead of understanding why you fear these things, you may let fear overrun you. Today, you can put the things you fear in perspective by asking yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? Perhaps the people you meet won't like you. You won't be able to buy new shoes you wanted, or you'll be a bundle of nerves before your speech. Or on the other hand, what you fear may not be negative. Maybe you won't have an argument with your parents, or you will be able to kick your habit. Whatever your fears may be, you need to see them as instructive lessons, not frightening monsters. Study one of your fears today to see what you can learn from it. Oh, let me read that sentence. Whatever your fears may be, you need to see them as instructive lessons, not frightening monsters. Study one of your fears today to see what you can learn from it. Once you understand each new lesson, you'll have a lot less to fear. And today's affirmation: I believe that there's nothing in my life to be afraid of. Today, I will strive to understand my fears. Isn't it so funny how that works? Yeah, it just tied everything full circle. So, thank you all for tuning in. And I really hope that everything gets to you in a good way. And that you take that moment, to trust yourself when you want to be vulnerable and understand how courageous that is. And look at your fears and as your allies rather than your enemies. And maybe considering that the friendship isn't working anymore. It's not like they're your long-term enemies that are against you. The fears we have are set in place because some place in our brain utilizes them to kind of create safety. If we don't do this fear, if we don't participate in this fear, we will be safe, and then sometimes it makes us unsafe, ironically. So just sitting with that and what comes up with our fear. And sometimes fear looks like other things. So also being mindful of that as well. And being patient with yourself, compassionate with yourself. And make sure that you remember to soothe yourself and pay attention to what you're feeding and what you're watering. And follow what is making you feel good and what's making you feel passionate. So that's the message for today. The reading is now closed. Thank you all, and I will see you next Wednesday.